you're talking about the all, and how the all in the Kabbalion is God, and that it's basically on a spectrum. Like love and hate. Like love and hate are the same thing. There's like different ends of it, different extremes of it.
Yes.
And so the all, or God, could basically represent both of those at the same time.
Yeah, like the idea, like some people have the idea that the God of the Old Testament is like the evil God, and then the God of the New Testament, or Jesus, was at least from a different God, the God of light. And then some Christians believe that they are the God of the Old Testament and God of the New Testament are the same. But either way, people struggle with the idea. If you're a Christian, you have the devil to blame on evil. But I think in the beginning, a lot of people just believe that God, and I think it's like in Job or somewhere in the Bible, it says God created darkness and stuff. God is on a spectrum of good, of like all. He's the all. So he can be found in the lowest to the highest degrees. He's found in all places. You just have to be able to recognize him for who he is. Exactly. Or who it is, or it's not necessarily. But I'm not sure like how to explain it. But you just need all of it. You need the good and the bad, and God deals out wrath to who he gives wrath to, and then he gives mercy to who he gives mercy to. God like is both. He creates both goodness and darkness.
And like I thought it was interesting how Robert Monroe. I was like listening to a book by him, and I watched a video about him as well. And he basically was the one who coined the term loosh. He was the first one to talk about loosh, and how it's basically energy that we are giving to some kind of entity that is feeding off of us. Like we're a battery, like in the Matrix. Like, we're literally like a battery for whatever created this simulation or life or universe, whatever we're living in. And he was talking about how Robert Monroe was talking about how like love is kind of the source of everything, like pure love, and like it's like on a spectrum, like love and hate is on a spectrum, and basically like loosh can be it can come from love or hate, but they're again the same thing. And I've wondered, like, is there a good entity that feeds off love and a negative entity that feeds off hate? Because there's a saying that you are, you eat. And so if you are, you eat. Like if these things are eating hatred, then they're hatred and they're negativity and they're all that bad stuff. But if they're eating the love, then they're better.
And we were talking about this before, about whether or not, like, there's a gray area of these fallen beings, of whether or not they have free will, or if they are born inherently evil, or if they have the ability to choose good. And if they have the ability to choose good, then is there a space for them in the everlasting kingdom of love with the all? And I would say that there is, if they were born with the ability to choose for themselves.
Exactly. Like how the Nephilim, they were the fallen angels, had children, and they were the Nephilim. But did the Nephilim have a choice to be born that way?
Exactly.
They were just born a Nephilim.
Or they were just born. And I think there's a difference between just being conscious of yourself, though, or having a conscience, which is that little voice that says, like, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. And maybe they're only conscious, kind of like with AI, too, kind of going into a different direction. Like, is AI merely, is it conscious of itself? Well, it has to be conscious of itself because it knows about itself. But does it have a conscience?
Exactly.
Which gives it a soul. And this kind of goes back to these Nephilim. Do they have a soul? And if they do have a soul, then it would make sense that they have the right to choose between good or evil. But if they don't, then I guess they're more like an animal.
Exactly.
And I'm not sure which one it is yet, but...
And, I recently listened to The Reveal by David Icke, and basically talking about the idea that this whole life is a simulation, that the whole universe is a simulation, basically, to feed off of us, that our souls are. He actually doesn't even like to use the word soul. Like, he thinks that the soul is another trap as well, that we're really just pure spirit. That's what we are, just awareness, really. And that, we have infinite potential, but we keep coming back to this because when we have a near-death experience or something, or when people die, they cross over, they get tricked into coming back. Like people with NDEs, they explain how, they always see like a figure of light or like a relative or, someone who has passed on that they knew in their life that, basically tells them to come back to Earth or something. They tell them to come back.
And you're saying these are like imposters? Or
exactly.
Perceived?
David Icke would say that, yes, that these are basically part of the AI system, the AI simulation.
They get people to come back to Earth again.
And he calls it like astral AI. So it's like an AI that is more advanced than we could even comprehend on this Earth. Because it's like basically a fourth dimensional AI.
That's a very fascinating thought. And see, and I'm not sure what to think about all this, truthfully, but like, there's the idea that either the Christian idea is true, and this world right now is controlled by Satan, which makes sense as to why there's so much chaos, and eventually Christ will have a second coming and there'll be a millennial reign, and then eventually a final battle and final judgment, and then the new heaven will be Earth, and that will be the play out of the world. Or if this other theory is true, which this also kind of connects with the Gnostic view of the demiurge being this false, basically lower god who was created from basically an accident from the feminine creating on Sophia creating on her own and creating the demiurge, which only has basically the toxic masculine traits because of that imbalance, and that the demiurge is in control of this lower material world, and then he has his archons and stuff that try to keep people trapped here in this prison planet. So that connects to that theory. But if that's true, then how are we saved? Is Christ still true? Are we saved through? Is there salvation through Christ's death and resurrection, or is it the Gnostic belief that we're saved through Christ through the knowledge that he provided us through his life and teachings, that we can break free from this matrix, from that? A combination of both? Like, what is the next steps here
exactly
with these theories being presented?
And I thought, I was thinking that, like, how the fall of man happened, and in the Garden of Eden, that Eve was tempted with the knowledge of good and evil, pretty much, and how basically humanity, or Eve and Adam, they made the choice to know about evil. And it's almost like if God is the all, if he's everything, then would that mean that God was also the serpent in the Garden of Eden?
Yeah, I think that's fascinating.
He basically asked them, okay, do you want to know about evil? And if you do want to know about evil, then I'll show you. And before that happened, only goodness existed, but because humanity chose to know about evil, now evil exists in the world.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the idea that in some of these texts, I'm pretty sure Christ is represented as the serpent, which seems crazy, but that's why, and maybe that's why some of these texts were banned and deemed as heretical, honestly, but that's what they say. And if that's the case, well, that kind of connects back to what we're saying, that God is the all, and that he's being represented here through these different, I guess you could call them archetypes, to represent him in all his facets.
Exactly. And that's really strange too. Like, and Jesus said in the Bible, there's a quote from Jesus saying that we need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves.
Yeah.
Basically saying that we need to know the enemy's tactics, but God himself could be the enemy. he's basically both. Like the God in the Old Testament seems way more harsh than the God in the New
Yes.
Testament.
Yes, and there are some differences. An eye for an eye in the past, love your enemy in the future, when Christ came. So it's just like,
And
that's a little bit different.
Is it the same God, and he's just expressing different, polarities of himself, or is it two different entities?
Yeah.
And is this the negative entity? Are they feeding off negativity, and they're trying to make humanity have suffering and stuff? And is the good God trying to, bring peace and joy to the world? And it's just like...
Well, I think Christ even said he's going to bring a sword, which is division.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because like we were saying, like how, love and hate is on the spectrum, and basically, if you love somebody,
Yes.
the love that you feel for that person, it can also bring you very, severe pain at
Yes.
the same time, because like,
Yes.
because
Very true. Exactly. Like, when you have love for someone, you're opening yourself up to both ends of the spectrum, because life itself has a lot of hardships, and then when you open yourself up to love someone, you're opening yourself up to them maybe not loving you in return, which could cause a lot of pain. And so there's it just takes a lot of courage, honestly, to love, truthfully, to truly love is very, just the act of it is courageous, because usually it's natural to be fearful and not want to do that.
Exactly. And so really, like it's basically necessary for there to be a devil or an adversary, because it was almost inevitable, because if God is pure love, if that's what the creative energy, the original energy that created everything was just pure love, then it's inevitable that there would have to be an opposite to that, and there would have to come along with maybe not experiencing that love. If you experience that love and you know what it's like to have that love, not experiencing it would be like painful, and it'd be the opposite of that almost.
Yeah.
And it's because it's just, that's the way it has to function, because there has to be an opposite in everything.
Yep. It's like, it goes back to the I think it's one of the Hermetic principles of duality.
Yeah, I think it's polarity,
duality, that concept, and of just the opposition in all things, which is a phrase that that's quoted from the Book of Mormon. That there has to be, I think, I'm not sure where, I can't remember where it's quoted in there, but that's where it says there's opposition in all things. And I believe that to be true, because without it, like, for example, like the more pain you've experienced, the more joy you're able to feel, that you're able to you could feel.
Exactly.
It's almost as if it's like, because, like, for example, when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and they only knew good in the beginning, they didn't have anything to compare against what they were feeling.
Yeah.
So they didn't know that what they were feeling was bliss or joy or whatever it is they're feeling, because there was nothing to compare it against.
It's similar to someone, if they were just born blind or something, they wouldn't even know what it would be like to see. They wouldn't have anything to compare it to.
Exactly. You have to have something to help you differentiate between the differences. And if you don't, then, and you can only do that to the level of which you've done that, which means, like, if you've only ever got a paper cut, well, then you can't relate to someone who's experienced much worse, like had surgery, It's not the same.
Exactly.
But then it's like also like the joy of recovering from something major like that. Getting healed from a paper cut is not the same as getting healed from something more miraculous.
Yeah, exactly.
So the joy felt will be different as well. It's just, it's all on a spectrum.
It's similar to how, some people will say that they go through something really hard in their life, and then, later on, because the, events that happen because of that hard thing in their life, something good happened to them later on.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they end up saying that hard thing they went through was actually the best thing that happened to him because they got something much greater in life later on.
Exactly. It's like sacrifice. It goes back to the concept of sacrifice. And that makes a lot of sense.